The slowing U.S. job market has made looking for work nearly impossible for many Americans.
It's been impossibly difficult. It's been almost 2 years.
I was told by a lot of people that I was going to get a job right out of college, and then all of a sudden, there's no jobs.
I feel invisible because despite serving my country, despite being a veteran, the job market has still shown no mercy.
41 years old, worked as a leader at a digital marketing company for 6 years, now unemployed. At 22 years old, fresh out of university, I sent out 200 job applications in over a month and got rejected every place. A former soldier who served for 6 years and has 2 young children. He couldn't find work, and when his child had the flu, they had to share Tamiflu because it was too expensive to buy enough doses. 3 stories, 3 small slices, but they represent over 2 million Americans who were swept out of the labour market in a short period of time. These are no longer isolated cases, but this tragedy has become a new version of the American dream, where thousands are struggling to survive in a nation once considered the promised land of stability, opportunity, and advancement. In just a few months, millions of jobs have disappeared from the United States. From technology and retail to finance and services, every industry is experiencing a level of contraction unseen since the Great Depression. Experts are calling this a correction cycle. But for those who are losing their homes, their income, and even their sense of future direction, this is not an adjustment. This is a crisis. In today's video, we'll explore why the US economy is still reporting growth, but millions of people can't find work. And is the US job market really on the brink of collapse? Let's get started right now. The weather station can predict rainstorms, but this time they missed a real thunderstorm. An event that swept away over 2 million jobs across the United States. It came so unexpectedly that millions of workers were knocked out of the job market before they could prepare, along with the last safe haven they still believed in. This sounds absurd at first, especially when reports consistently publish a reassuring figure. The overall unemployment rate has only been around 4.3% in recent years. But perhaps that's only half the truth. According to the latest CBS statistics, the number of long-term unemployed, those who have been out of the labour market for over 27 weeks, is approaching 1.9 million people, which is equivalent to over a quarter of the total unemployed nationwide. If you lined up that number in a straight line, it would stretch into a long line of people from New York to Chicago, waiting for a job door to open. But it seems no one knows where the key is. Long-term unemployment is not like an involuntary vacation. It's the feeling of being thrown off your familiar life path. And just like an object floating in space, the further it is from its orbit, the weaker the pull to return. Some people say they experienced unemployment lasting longer than 4 months, competing with hundreds of other applicants for a single job. Despite being so harsh, they are still considered lucky and a good outcome compared to many who were forced to leave the state, the city, or even the country to find a job that could help them survive. The rift doesn't just affect one group of people. It spreads in distinct layers. Office workers in technology, finance, and media are witnessing the deepest job cuts in years. Services and logistics are under pressure because consumers are tightening their spending, while businesses are reducing working hours to stay afloat. Middle-skilled workers, once the backbone of the middle class, are caught between automation and rising living costs. Many people immediately mention AI as the biggest reason for these mass purges. That's not wrong, but it's only partially true. Because the bigger culprit lies in the sudden contraction of the market. The number of job openings has decreased by nearly 1.9 million positions compared to the same period last year, the deepest decline since 2020. The cake is not only shrinking, while the number of hungry people is increasing. On the business side, things are becoming more crowded. High interest rates increase the cost of capital. Debt is difficult to roll over, and revenue fluctuates as people tighten their belts. To survive, companies are responding by freezing hiring, reducing staff numbers, and prioritizing increased productivity over increasing manpower. The press calls this cooling or normalizing, which sounds like soft and safe movements. But for those who have been submitting applications throughout the year, what they feel is not a cooling market, but a complete freeze. On the surface, the United States still presents impressive figures: low unemployment, stable growth, and manageable bad debt. But the layer below tells a different story. People who once had stable jobs are having to use credit cards to survive, withdraw from their 401ks to pay bills, or take on temporary jobs just to stay on the survival track. Are those beautiful indicators still meaningful when the majority of residents feel they are getting poorer, more stressed, and less safe compared to just a few years ago? Today's labour market is like a one-way revolving door. More people are leaving than entering, and those who are outside remain outside, unsure when they will be able to step back in. If just work hard and everything will be fine was once the foundation of belief for many generations, what happens when that promise no longer aligns with reality? The answer is perhaps hidden behind the promises and beliefs that are gradually cracking. For many Americans today, the most unbelievable stories are no longer about Cinderella being successfully transformed into a princess by a fairy, or Snow White waking up after a curse. What made them even more suspicious was the idea that the American dream was once a real goal. With just effort, perseverance, and a little luck, you could achieve a stable and hopeful life. That belief was once the cultural foundation for many generations, especially families from the baby boomer generation and a portion of Gen X. Those who were able to buy homes, raise children, have relatively stable pensions and health insurance. But when you place that memory next to reality, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Someone who had a stable job for 6 to 10 years now has to gradually withdraw from their 401k to pay monthly bills. A former soldier who assumed his child was automatically covered by insurance was ultimately forced to share a prescription because medical costs exceeded his ability to pay. These are not isolated incidents, but rather a snapshot of a general mood, a feeling of being abandoned by a system they trusted and to which they dedicated themselves completely. What disappointed them wasn't that life became difficult, but that they had done everything they were taught, gone to school, worked hard, paid taxes, and obeyed the law. If you try, you will be rewarded was once considered an ethical equation. When that equation no longer works, people not only lose income, they also lose certainty about the meaning of individual effort. This situation not only affects the older generation. Millennials entered the job market after the 2008 crisis, the worst time to start accumulating wealth. Many people take decades to recover their income, and just as they start to get back on their feet, housing costs exceed the affordability of an average income. Gen Z, the youngest generation in the market, is facing a new reality. Fewer entry-level positions, higher experience requirements, and competition that is many times more intense than before. The American dream didn't collapse overnight. It has been eroded over time by very specific factors. House prices have risen faster than wages, student debt has accumulated, and healthcare and education costs have far exceeded real income levels. The pillars that once helped Americans stabilize, home ownership, sustainable jobs, insurance, are now precarious goals for most workers. The psychological impact of this change is quite clear. Many Gen X and baby boomers feel betrayed. They did everything right, but the results didn't match their expectations. Millennials and Gen Z feel they've been misled by a promise they've never seen fulfilled in real life. If in fairy tales the Little Mermaid traded her voice for legs and still got a happy ending, many Americans today trade a lifetime of work just to receive an increasingly precarious life in return. When the link between individual effort and reward is broken, the entire moral foundation of a working society is challenged. If trying no longer leads to stability, What will keep the next generation believing in the value of work? And in that context of wavering trust, a new factor emerged, promoted as a productivity tool, but simultaneously the reason for the first job losses: artificial intelligence. The question is AI merely supporting the workforce, or is it redefining what humans are allowed to do in the modern economy? Changes in the labor market don't just come from macroeconomic factors or hiring freezes. A new, quieter but more powerful force is reshaping the structure of work: artificial intelligence. Tasks that once required human effort, writing a simple code snippet, creating a report, drafting an advertisement, or translating a piece of text, can now be handled in seconds by commercial AI models. The underlying mechanism isn't difficult to understand. These models are trained on a vast amount of data, including books, newspapers, source code, internal documents, and countless forms of structured information. They are particularly effective for tasks that are patterned, repetitive, or can be described in text. This presents a new reality. Many tasks that once required basic skilled personnel can now be automated almost instantly. The most direct impact is seen in office work. AI is starting to perform primary tasks: summarizing reports, drafting documents, preparing emails, processing files, categorizing data, or creating basic media content. As a result, the demand for junior, intern, or entry-level positions has decreased significantly. This was originally the first step for millennials and Gen Z to enter the job market, and its narrowing makes it difficult for them to find an entry point like previous generations. From the business perspective, the motivation to use AI becomes even more apparent in the context of rising costs and unstable revenue. Interest rates make it difficult for companies to roll over their debt, while the pressure to maintain profit margins is increasing. Under those conditions, AI becomes a quick and low-risk solution. Instead of hiring 3 new employees, a business might only need 1 senior staff member combined with an AI model to handle the remaining workload. This isn't just a technology choice, it's a financial one. Looking at it from a historical perspective, the baby boomer generation once competed with automation that replaced manual labor, robots, assembly lines, and machinery. And millennials and Gen Z face a new version: low-level cognitive labor automation. This creates a new generation gap, where the advantages of experience or basic qualifications no longer provide the same security as before. At the industry level, this impact is clearly evident. Junior programmers are being replaced by systems capable of generating code automatically. New marketing graduates are competing with tools that can write dozens of advertising options in seconds. Data entry or customer service staff are being replaced by models capable of analysis and automated responses. AI doesn't necessarily take away an entire job, but it eats away at it piece by piece, causing hiring needs to decrease before new career opportunities can even form. This shift raises a difficult question that cannot be avoided. If lower-level positions, which are the entry point into the job market, are being taken over by AI, how will young people enter the market? And for older workers, who are often seen as high cost and difficult to retrain, where will they stand in an increasingly automated system? When experience is seen as a burden, what will happen to those who have spent their lives working to build their positions? One of the most concerning transformations in the current labor market is the phenomenon of being overqualified as a reason for rejecting candidates, especially those with 15 to 25 years of experience. Many middle-aged candidates are rejected with familiar phrases like "not a cultural fit," "skills too high for the position," or "salary expectations not compatible." Behind those explanations is often a purely cost-based problem. Businesses worry that these people are expensive, difficult to retrain, and slow to adapt to new processes. When faced with pressure to cut costs, HR departments tend to choose good enough candidates. Often younger individuals who accept lower salaries, are willing to work overtime, and have fewer benefit requirements. In that context, experienced individuals are no longer seen as intellectual assets, but rather as an expense to be cut. This creates an apparent paradox. Those who contributed to building the company's operational foundation are now seen as obstacles during a period of austerity. The psychological impact of this displacement is very deep. The previous generation, who were proud of their journey of skill accumulation, dedication to the organization, and building of reputation, now face the feeling of being seen as a burden. They didn't just lose their jobs, they also lost the basis for answering the question, where is my value? Constant rejection led them into a spiral of self-doubt, even though their skills were still relevant. From an organizational perspective, the mass exodus of veteran personnel causes the company to lose what is known as organizational memory. When those who have handled crises, who know exactly why the current process was formed, or who have avoided past mistakes leave, businesses are very likely to repeat old errors. This is an invisible but not insignificant cost. The cost of no longer having anyone with real-world experience to guide the system. Within society, the 45-60 age group of workers finds themselves in the most difficult position. They can't retire yet, but it's also not easy to re-enter the labour market when they're considered too expensive or too old to retrain. As a result, they are more likely to get stuck in long-term unemployment, be forced to accept temporary or gig work, or withdraw retirement funds early to make ends meet. This is the very group that was once the financial backbone of the family, covering children's education expenses, caring for elderly parents, and maintaining stability for multiple generations under one roof. When this group experiences upheaval, the entire American family system is affected. A typical journey often follows the same script: losing a job, sending out hundreds of applications, facing repeated rejections, and then being forced to take temporary work or gradually deplete retirement savings. Many people describe this not just as unemployment, but as a feeling of being excluded from the system to which they contributed their entire lives. A sense of injustice emerges. I worked my whole life to keep this system running, and in the end, the system treats me like an expired product. This change raises a big question. If experienced workers are pushed out, who will lead the young workforce entering the market? And how wide will the generational gap in the workforce be when experienced individuals no longer have a place to stand? The generational gap in the American workforce has never been as pronounced as it is now. Both ends of the market are under pressure, but in completely different ways. Millennials and Gen Z are entering the workforce with significant student loan debt, starting salaries that don't keep pace with the cost of living, and a decline in entry-level job opportunities. They are not only competing with each other, but also with the emergence of AI, systems that can handle most of the entry-level tasks traditionally done by graduates. On the other hand, Gen X and baby boomers face a different kind of pressure. They bear greater financial responsibility, paying for their children's education, caring for elderly parents, and maintaining household expenses, all while being perceived as too old, too slow, or unable to adapt to new technologies. Not a few people are forced to face the risk of being eliminated from the market before they are able to prepare for retirement. Despite their different circumstances, both groups shared a common experience. They didn't feel the labour market operated as fairly as they had been told. The factors that determine their opportunities, age, historical context, hiring patterns, are all beyond their control. This creates a widespread sense of discontent, as each generation feels judged by variables unrelated to their ability or effort. The psychological distance between the two generations also grew from that point on. Many older people believe that young people don't try hard enough, as they remember their time when simply working hard was enough to buy a house, raise children, and build stability. Meanwhile, young people look at the reality of housing prices, student loan debt, healthcare costs, and wage levels, and see that the current economic equation is nothing like it was for previous generations. Both sides are talking about the same concept, trying, but in two completely different contexts. This distance also directly affects families. Parents don't understand why their child is having such a hard time finding a job. Children don't understand why their parents don't understand the times. This intergenerational tension erodes internal unity, at a time when families should be standing together more than ever. If generations within the same family or business don't understand each other, how can a nation unite on the answer to the bigger question? What do we want the future labour market to look like? The impact of long-term unemployment doesn't stop at the individual level. It's spread layer by layer from one family to an entire neighbourhood, and then throughout the entire economic structure. When someone loses their job for months, the first change is in their spending. They cut back on shopping, postpone medical appointments, limit travel, and hardly participate in tourism or recreational activities. This tightening immediately impacts small businesses in their local areas, family restaurants, auto repair shops, convenience stores, which rely on daily transactions. As customer traffic decreases, these businesses are forced to reduce hours, cut shifts, or lay off their core employees, creating a new downward spiral. On the next level, the unemployed are forced to use their years of accumulated savings or withdraw their retirement funds early to cover basic living expenses. When their emergency funds ran out, they started using credit cards and accepting high interest rates. This increases household debt, reduces future spending capacity, and prolongs the cycle of personal financial decline. A vicious cycle forms. The longer they are unemployed, the more financially depleted they become. The more financially depleted they are, the harder it is for them to re-enter the labour market. The third layer reflects long-term damage, often referred to as economic scars. When someone leaves the labour market for too long, their skills become outdated, their resume shows unexplained gaps, and their confidence significantly declines. Even if the market recovers, they will find it difficult to return to their previous income levels. The result is the formation of a new poor layer. People who were once middle class but were pushed down by a prolonged series of unemployment. Overall, these factors create a distinct domino effect. A layoff decision in a company boardroom can have far-reaching consequences. From local stores seeing reduced revenue, children having to change schools because their parents can't afford it, to community hospitals facing greater pressure as people delay medical care. These are not isolated personal tragedies, but a chain of organised consequences stemming from an increasingly fragile market structure. If long-term unemployment can weaken both human lives and the economic foundation, what is truly on the brink of collapse? The job market, or something deeper within the social structure? When all the pieces are put together, from the disappearance of millions of jobs, the erosion of the American dream, the pressure of AI, the generation gap, to the economic scars left by long-term unemployment, the picture that emerges is not just a troubled labour market. It shows a social structure under much greater pressure than surface figures might reflect. What's concerning isn't just the loss of jobs, but also the weakening of the foundations that bind people together and connect them to the economy, which are eroding layer by layer. And perhaps this is the real question we must face. If the forces eroding the labour market continue to increase, is America facing a job crisis or a deeper social imbalance, where expectations, values, and reality no longer meet? If you've ever seen a part of this story in your own community, in your family, or in the career paths of loved ones, please share your thoughts. Personal experiences can help us understand the bigger picture. If you find these analyses helpful, please like, share, and subscribe so the video reaches more people, and so we can continue to learn together what is truly driving America today. The content in this video is based on public reports, data from statistical agencies, reputable socio-economic analyses, and real-world observations from various sources. All information is presented for reference purposes only. and is not intended to be absolute or to provide financial, political, legal, or career advice. The interpretation and evaluation in the video reflect the analytical perspective at the time of its creation and may change depending on the socio-economic context. Viewers are encouraged to do further research and compare with official information sources to make decisions appropriate for their individual circumstances.